Welcome to the Best for Women Live podcast. Joining me today is Jennifer Singh from She's Newsworthy Media, and I'm really excited to have her on to talk about media and PR. If we haven't met before, hi, my name's Brooke Gordon and I'm your host for today. We're just going to get Jennifer joined in, so Jen, if you are listening, beautiful. Today is one that's really, I think, valuable because so many of us are not as familiar with PR and working in the media. It is a bit of a specialty. So really excited to have her on to dig into this. Welcome. Hello.
Hi. How are you? Nice to see you. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. So my promise to you and I is I will watch the time because I love chatting with you, and I know that we can just go on for ages and ages and spend our whole days with that together.
Yes.
So that'll be my commitment to us. Now, before we get started into our full conversation, I wanted to invite you to take a minute to just briefly introduce yourself to everyone in case there's those who haven't met you yet.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for having me on this Monday. My name is Jennifer Singh. I'm a former television reporter based out of Canada. I work in Ontario, mostly have clients across the country as a PR coach. So I transitioned out of television probably, I don't know how many years officially, 2018, I officially said I'm done. And now I help women entrepreneurs land media and PR. That's what I do.
Love it. I love it. So I wanted to dig into some of our topics, and let's just start off with your transition. What led you to, I'll say, I know it's a big, I know this is a big question. And so, we can pick it apart into pieces, but, what really led you to become a PR coach?
I knew that I had to leave. I knew that I didn't have the ability to stay in the industry much longer after over 15 years. It was really tough in terms of scheduling shifts. Someone like myself is not going to be at the top of the food chain in a newsroom, right? So working mornings, working 1 to 10 shifts. Also, the commute was actually killing me. So, as part of my story, for sure, I wanted to do something more with my life, but from a practical standpoint, I was done with the commute. I was pregnant with my second child when I was still freelancing, and I remember waddling down Front Street getting to one of the media outlets, and I was like, there's no way. And we know from conversations over the year and throughout the pandemic how hard it is for women in particular in the workplace when it comes to raising children and being able to be really successful, right? So we have the studies, the statistics, we don't have to go through all of that. But that was the driving factor. And the other driving factor was the feeling that I wasn't living up to my fullest potential. I find that especially when you work in an environment where, you are at the bottom of the food chain, and that's really where I felt like I was, it is really hard to fulfill your true purpose. So, leaning into the skills that I already have as a reporter, being able to be comfortable on camera, helping other people become comfortable on camera, which is what happens when you're interviewing somebody. You're actually coaching them to give you the best clip, right? You want them to be at ease, knowing that I had the ability to, just people trust me with a lot of information. And I find that is still the case. So the whole mission behind the company, She's Newsworthy Media, is really to amplify diverse stories from those who identify as women.
Okay. This is why I love the work that you're doing and why it's so important. But you mentioned twice the same phrase, the bottom of the food chain. Can you help us understand a little bit, or just paint a picture of what that meant for you?
Well, being one of few women of color in a newsroom means that you don't have as much decision-making power when it comes to pitching story ideas. So one of my biggest frustrations was just being in an environment where people didn't understand why we needed diverse perspectives. I actually started, Brooke, at a community station, and that, I will say, was the foundation for me having the insight to always tell the other side of the story. So I would be doing big stories, going to the Prime Minister's office, things like that, or not his office, the Premier's office. But when the Prime Minister was in town, going to those events, covering really big stories. And while all the major media outlets were covering the agenda or whatever everybody was covering, we would always go into the community and get that other perspective. So when I brought that perspective to some of the other media outlets that I was part of, my ideas often did get shut down. That's just the fact of how it was. And that's not to say that that was my experience in every newsroom, but it was a fight to get stories heard. And I know that many other women and men can relate to this and the power dynamics in a newsroom, seeing things like, okay, well, X station has now published this story or done the story. So yes, let's do that story. That, that now verifies that that's a diversity story that we could do, right? Or we could, I could talk about that forever, but, the power dynamics, just not being able to be seen, be heard, not being comfortable. And when you're an entrepreneur, it's very different. You run the game, right? It's up to you. You call the shots at the end of the day. You choose who you get to work with. We choose the stories that we get to tell in collaboration with our clients, asking them, does this feel in alignment with your brand and your vision and the mission that you want to put out there and amplify? It's not a dictatorship. Not saying newsrooms are, but it's not how it is, right? Very collaborative, going into any sort of story that we tell and try to amplify. And we've amplified over 300 stories, and very proud of some of the diverse angles that we've been able to amplify. Because I didn't have that power in a newsroom, but I seem to now have the power outside of the newsroom to get those stories to air.
Okay, we're going to pick this one apart as well, because there's a couple of things that I think are really valuable that I want to reiterate. And one of them is this idea of the power dynamic, the decision-making dynamic, what story gets told from what perspective, and the fact that it was almost like a followership. It was, oh no, we're not going to go first with that. Oh wait, they did that? Okay, well now we can do that, right? It's almost this, they needed to give themselves permission by someone else being the one to step forward. So there's, to me, a lack of courage. Is that fair to say?
Lack of, from their perspective?
So, yeah.
No, not courage. I have some strong words that I won't use, but we know during the pandemic that a lot of the newsrooms got called out for not being inclusive. A lot of them got pushed into the forefront. There were newsrooms where entire staff were almost entire staffs were signing petitions. This was happening during Black Lives Matters and, 2020, when it was very much in the front and center, and a lot of the reporters and producers calling out management for just not being inclusive in the stories or even in the hiring practices or even what's happening, right? Because a lot of people see a lot of diversity in front of the camera, but that doesn't mean that the decision makers behind the scenes are the ones as diverse. So that dynamic has always existed, and then it becomes a cycle, Brooke, where a lot of those senior leaders in newsrooms end up teaching journalism in journalism school. And then again, the cycle continues. Like I was in a journalism school in 2003. I was one of 5 women in my class. It was a post-grad program, and one of maybe 3 or 4 people that looked anything like me, right? Yep. We had a Black woman. We had somebody who was East Asian, myself, my good friend Joe, he was Black, and me. Out of all our teachers, right?
Yeah.
Don't look like us either, right? So it's funny because I actually was telling a story on LinkedIn the other day about what that experience was like, and just again not feeling seen or heard. Nobody teaches you how to perform on camera in journalism school. There's never any media coaching ever. You just kind of stumble, and some of the higher tier anchors get that media coaching and have access to it. But I recounted a story where one of my teachers was, we were teaching, it was a radio class, and she had everybody read a script. And in that script, I only made it through half the sentence, and she cut me off and she said, nope, you're not confident. Next. And that was the extent of the coaching, right? So I was humiliated. I felt, my self-confidence was hit. And that self-confidence piece followed me through my entire journalism career. In front of the mic, up until when I officially left, right? I was always so conscious of how I sound. Do I sound okay? And it was only when I started leaning into being okay with my voice that it actually, because I was always this is the thing, I was always trying to sound and be and look like somebody else that I wasn't, because those were the people that were getting the accolades in newsrooms at the end of the day. So this was something that followed me throughout my entire career.
So I'm going to circle back just a little bit. What is the decision making then around what stories go forward? Because we talked, we sort of started this off with, well, they weren't going to pick a story until someone else did it. And then suddenly it was valued by them, important to them. So what is some of that thinking around, maybe this is a little bit of the mindset, but how were they and how are they making decisions?
I don't know how they make the decisions, honestly, because it didn't have any rhyme or reason a lot of the time. I will tell you that, right? They would stick to a certain narrative and be in that narrative consistently. The way that we focus it now is you could be telling the exact same story over and over again, which you are sometimes. But what is the fresh angle? What is the new angle? What is the new perspective that someone else is going to be bringing? I was just chatting with a new client that we're in the process of onboarding, and she does corporate wellness workshops, which, corporate wellness has been a hot topic over the past few years for sure. And I was telling her in January, that's usually one of the times where they talk about things like employment numbers and what that would look like. But also what's really unique about her perspective is that she does a lot of the mind-body connection when it comes to showing up as your best self in the workplace. And for me, that's an interesting perspective. We are successful because we're pitching stories to the media that, same time of year, but we're just putting a fresh angle on it and making sure that we're up to date with some of the trends. Entrepreneurs, honestly, have the best stories, hidden stories that they don't realize are newsworthy to tell. And the media is looking for fresh angles. The media that we connect with and the ones that I've built relationships with over the years, and I built my list from scratch. Just because I worked in the newsrooms doesn't mean that I had a whole list of contact. We have about 30 to 40 contacts on our list now. Built those all from scratch over the years, but I develop relationships with media who are open to telling diverse stories from new perspectives. You can tell from the types of stories they tell, the types of people they interview, the types of, just the way they deliver their stories with care. And I always say that kind of in a reassuring way, because there is that idea that the media is out to get you, and that is absolutely not true. There are many, many wonderful, thoughtful, engaging, dedicated, passionate journalists in this country that are willing to look at different story ideas and to get different stories amplified. So I can now speak from my perspective. I know if I had to go into a newsroom tomorrow, I would probably be feeling the same sort of frustration. There's almost like a hierarchy. It's funny, Brooke? There was somebody on LinkedIn that posted a photo of the editorial meeting they were having. And they were very proud to post this photo because it was the first time they were all in person. No diversity at the table. There was like 10 people and 1 to 2 people. It is a blind spot. They don't even realize it. So when you take that and you start trickling down and somebody's pitching a story, if you can't even see that your team that is making all the decisions has a lack of diversity, then it's a problem, right? It's a huge problem. I recommend that everybody watch the morning show on Apple TV. This is with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. Fantastic television show. Fiction or fact? Fiction or fact? Fiction or fact? Take a look at that show. 3 seasons, fiction or fact?
Interesting. Okay, so what is it? Because you just named two women, right? And they're the key characters, but
and
also,
they're white. And they're white, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just because someone is white does not mean that they cannot be an exceptional ally.
Yep.
And end of day, right? And they portray a lot of that in the show, which I love. But there was a scene actually in season 3, the last episode, I guess. Oh, there's another episode coming out tomorrow. Really good. But last week, and I was just watching it, and there was 3 women of power in power positions. It was like one of the head editors, the second in command, and one of the anchors on the morning show, and they were all Black, and they were in one scene. I just, my mind was blown. I was like, this would never happen in a real newsroom. Like, this would never happen in a real newsroom. It was actually very profound. I believe, don't get me wrong, like, don't hold me to this, but I believe that Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, if anybody knows in the chat, have some editorial decision-making power in the way that the show is being played out. I believe that might be the case. And there's some very interesting dynamics around diversity, who's in leadership. It's just so interesting to see a perspective like that I've never seen before. And yeah, okay, Reese is a producer, yes, right? So that's what I say, like, just because they're the lead. In the first season, this actually did bother me though, because the first season was really centered around sexual harassment and something that happened to one of the characters, and the character was, I won't give it away if you haven't seen it, but the character was the focal point. But it did bother me that on all of the promotional material for that, she was nowhere to be seen, right? It was Reese and Jennifer. And she was really one of the central characters in the storyline for that season. Thank you, Roxanne, coming in, executive producers. Yes, they are. They are. So yeah, so it's, you know, it's a very interesting series.
Okay, very cool. So is this more of an insight into, I'll say, how like this dynamic, this sort of power that you've been talking to, but as someone who's either a consumer of media, right? We have morning television shows that some of us watch, but also as an entrepreneur or a leader who's looking to connect with media and this sort of concept around PR, which I'm going to get you to explain the acronym of it. Tell me more about this mindset that we can start bringing, because I'm hearing there's little shifts. There are people out there who really do come from a place of care, who want to tell interesting stories of many people. So how do we navigate this shift?
Well, I think, like, out of the women that I've worked with, we worked with over 100 women inside our program, probably about 75% of them, with my statistics and my data, come with the perception that they don't understand how their story is newsworthy. They don't understand how they can push themselves to the front of the line. And I say to them, the insecurities that you have around your story, men don't think like this. They don't wake up and think, oh, I don't know if my story is going to be picked up by the media. Men are the ones, we have the statistics to show, it's only 1 in 4 women that are being selected as media experts. Men have the contacts, men have the confidence, men, I was about to swear, men just don't care, okay? They just don't care. They show up with their own audacity, and I actually think that we should lean more into that and stop caring so much, right? So some of the things that we care about as women, and we're putting ourselves out there, is like the fear, right? What are people going to think about me? Or maybe you grew up around people, or yeah, men assume they're right. They do. We have to start assuming we're right. And if we're not, and we make a mistake, just keep going. Don't beat yourself up for it, right? We're so hard on ourselves. And I think that when you think about the fear piece, and then you think about being judged, or you've grown up in a home or a culture or an environment where it's not appropriate to talk about yourself, and it's not appropriate to talk about your accomplishments. And one of the biggest mindset shifts, because I had this throughout my entire career as a reporter, but even now, is I want you to stop focusing on that, and I want you to start focusing on the impact your story is going to be making and the impact your message is going to be making. Think about that end person, right? So many times, I just shared another story about, you know, I was guest host on The Social last year around this time. And of course, I was nervous. It was a big deal for me. I worried about how I would look. What am I going to sound? I only got my story topics a few hours before the show. Am I going to be smart enough? All these things. And I posted the clip, and I got flooded with comments about representation, and you know, I forgot about the impact that it was going to make on the community, my entrepreneur community, my fellow entrepreneurs, other people that look like me, you know.
You coming back? Oh, hold on. It's not back yet. Jennifer, hang on. I can't hear you all of a sudden. There you go.
Okay, there we are. We're back.
You're back.
Sorry.
No, it's totally okay.
Instagram was telling me that I had used my limit for the day. I put a setting on it. Sorry, I totally forgot about that.
That's okay.
So that mindset shift, we need to show up more with courage and stop worrying about what other people are thinking, right? Like we're in this Instagram world where everything has to be perfect. Thank God we've kind of moved away from the perfect grid. And remember during the pandemic, we were doing reels and changing our outfits every day. Like we're done with that. Just show up with imperfection. Know that you are the expert. You are the person that has the best knowledge on your topic because of your expertise, your experience, the work that you're doing. Stop thinking that you need to have a book published or your own podcast, and take the media off the pedestal. Like I see this time and time again. We put them on this huge pedestal. And I say, whether you land media or not, it's not going to define you as a person. It really is not. It's a marketing strategy, just like SEO, just like your newsletter. Think about it like that. Take it off the pedestal. And I even get trapped in that as well too, right? I'm not the only person. I'm not just preaching and then expecting that for it to be easy, but that's one of the biggest things that I see for sure.
Oh, I really like that. Actually, so I saw Roxanne Francis is with us. She said men walk into the room based on their potential and women walk in based on their experience. And this is very true in finance world, right? So much of what you're saying, because I went through engineering and I went through as one of two women in engineering with no profs who looked like me and in any capacity. And then working in finance, seeing the same thing again. And this is very true in the venture capital world. And I saw a small clip from an event that happened this weekend, Arlene Dixon talking about the same thing. Man walks in completely audacious with this ask, I've got $2 million in debt. I've only raised, $500,000 over 10 years. I want to sell you like 10% of my company for like $1 million. And she's like, wait, what am I missing? And then this woman walks in and she's like, well, I'm really glad to be here. And, I've only done 2 million in sales and I bootstrapped the whole way. And I'm asking for like, $100,000 for 30% of my company. And they're like, wait, what?
Yep.
We're totally apologetic. Numbers don't make sense.
We're not asking. We're not asking.
Because, right? And it's not because she hasn't done her homework. It's because she's not having the confidence, the audaciousness to ask for what she deserves.
100%. I see that, right? It's the same statistic with job interviews. Or when you're applying for jobs, women make sure they check all, most of the boxes, and men don't care. They just still apply.
I am
right?
totally guilty of that. And
me too.
It's interesting because
me too.
And I had an executive sponsor who completely cut me at the knees. He's like, you haven't applied for this job. I said, I know I can't do this one thing. He's like, what? I will personally tutor you on how to do that when you get the job. You just go and apply, like right now. And
it
was
because they want people who can grow in the position.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I actually did the interview. And as I walked out, because I'd sort of, booked someone else's office to take the interview because we were off site, and he was waiting for me in the hall. Wanted to know how it went. Yeah. And it's really powerful to have someone, whether it's a coach, whether it's, someone sponsoring you, to be that voice when you don't have the voice for yourself.
I think that's so important. And I don't think that was one of the things that was missing in my career in a newsroom. I mean, there were some people, actually one person that I can think of that has been, somebody that I can lean on and rely on. And I was able to lean and rely on her for decades, still friends. We still pitch her actually, because she's still in the media. And she was that one person that was kind of the rock. But then when you lose that and you move to a different newsroom and that person's not there for you anymore, it is really hard. And, especially like the day-to-day grind of, dealing with, fussy producers, or just trying to figure out how to get the story, or just any sort of hiccups that you may have along the way. It is so important to have that type of leadership. I know some newsrooms have some sort of mentorship program that they're starting to implement, but I think that is actually really key. That is really key. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. And I know people talk about it more, but this was not something that I had access to for sure. I didn't have access to like a solid mentor until I was about 25, which I'm sorry, that's a little bit too late. That's really late, right? Really late in the game.
Yeah. And that works, I think, in absolutely everything in life, your career, your, how you apply your personal finances. Like, when you just start thinking about the breadth of topics, that why would you know if you've never been exposed to it? So it's really tying in your choices that you're making for yourself relative to your situation, almost I'm going to say sort of childhood surroundings, right? What was you talked about before? What would be appropriate, right? Was it appropriate for you to talk about yourself and your accomplishments? Well, in some cases, that's not part of a family dynamic, or that may not be part of a dynamic that you've been exposed to. And so you just don't do it.
Totally, 100%. I mean, I grew up with a single parent and we were mostly in survival mode for a lot of my life. So my early life, I should say. So it's not something that was, something that we would focus on, right? Because it's not priority at the end of the day, right? It's really just about being able to survive. And, culturally as well, I would say the influences that I had were very much like a lot of immigrant families and kids, where you should know your place, right? When you go, even just let's say, for example, negotiating pay, you don't really negotiate. You should be grateful for a job to begin with. And that's actually one of the hugest problems, one of the huge problems inside of newsrooms is that the feeling of you should be grateful to be even in the door. So this is why you also get in there and you don't really make a stink. And I thought for decades that it was just me that was experiencing that. And I didn't realize until I left that this was a common feeling that many others had. And, it just blows my mind because I was in this little bubble the whole time thinking that, it must be me. It must be something that I'm doing. I must not be good enough. In the meantime, it was the entire industry. People just don't talk about it, right? They don't talk about it. So it's unfortunate.
And it expands to so much, Jennifer, like listening to it's not even a podcast, it's like a show, radio show. And they were talking about something as, it was a news headline and it was around pap smears. And so the guy is like, and this is a big deal. And the two women just launched into it in graphic detail, the whole experience. And as I'm listening, I'm like, wait, what? Yeah, my doctor says that too. My doctor does that too. Well, my doctor's like bit by bit. I was like, oh no, it's not just me. And the level of accuracy and the weird nuanced details that are, shuffle further down, you got to come closer. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So it's almost like this universal experience that you had no idea you were part of the universe. You were just your own little grain of sand on a beach, right?
100%.
So in terms of that mindset, and you talked a little bit about marketing your business, tell us a little bit more about, first off, what does PR stand for? And then what is it? How does that integrate? Because you sort of touched on it a little bit. It's just one more strategy in your toolkit. But can you tell us a little bit more, expand a little bit more on that?
For sure. Public relations is what PR stands for. And it's funny because when I moved away from journalism, it took me a long time to say that I do PR, because as a journalist and a reporter, you have a relationship with PR that it's a necessary evil. It is called the dark side, right? PR for journalists seems to be concocted. It's something where we're concealing the truth, things like that, especially when it comes to, let's say, PR for government officials, right? There's always that perception that we can't get the story and that the person that we're interviewing is going to be giving us a standard clip, that we can't actually get like the real message and the real story. So, that was my impression going into PR, right? I really just called it media coaching. I didn't really associate it with PR at all because I was trying to keep it as far away from myself as possible. And over the years of when I launched my business, I realized, well, entrepreneurs identify with PR. So PR really is just a strategy for brand awareness and really to get your name out there, to build the authority and to get that credibility. So in the same vein where I say that, you don't need to put the media on a pedestal, you can also use the media to solidify your expertise and your credibility. There is this unspoken rule that if you are a media expert, that you know what you're talking about, that you are an excellent thought leader. And the ones that get those interviews time and time again, that's the reputation they have, right? So I always see it as something that should be in your toolkit when it comes to marketing. I think it does work in tandem with social media. We know now the Online News Act is in place, and that prevents us from necessarily posting links on our feed or sometimes in stories, but there are ways to get around that for sure. And I really see it like, taking a look at what you do differently and not necessarily talking about it specifically, depending on your business. Like for someone like myself, you're rarely going to be seeing me in the media talking about PR. You're going to be seeing me talk about things that are important to me, and my values as a business owner, whether that's things like inclusive marketing, whether that is pay transparency. Sometimes I have done interviews about mindset and showing up on camera and what that takes, especially on video. Did a lot of stories about that over the pandemic. And thinking about your thought leadership and your area of expertise. I'm never going to be talking about, hey, this is what I do. Like, that's not a story. The media wants your expertise on something. So let's say, for example, the mindset story that I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal for one of their newer sections. And they said, well, what are your top, 3 things that you use in terms of tools, right? Like, what are the tools? And I mentioned like the Calm app, my yoga bolster for like making sure my posture is good, and something else. But then I got to dive into the thought leadership piece when it comes to shifting your mindset to be on camera. So taking that and then amplifying that. So amplifying that, showcasing that in your newsletter, on your social channels, maybe in your bio, maybe when you're pitching for a speaking gig, making sure that you let people know that you are the go-to media expert. And that's where that gap is for women. There's a gap between them I'm just having an epiphany now. There's 2 gaps. There's a gap between them being able to recognize their stories are newsworthy. And then there's another gap when they are newsworthy and they land media to then leverage it, right? There's 2 gaps right there.
As seen on.
It's, yeah, right? Because now they have to own it. They have to own it. So I've seen people bury their content. I've seen people bury their news stories because they're just so afraid of putting it out there, or they receive awards and they don't want to put it out there because it looks like they're boasting. So it's this cycle, and it's mindset work that you have to do every single day, but it's an excellent tool to build your credibility, whether you're a newer business owner or whether you've been in business several years. You can use it to attract opportunities. I always use myself as an example because when I started doing media interviews, people think that, oh, you're a reporter, you know how to do interviews. I didn't. I had to learn. I'm good at asking questions. Am I good at answering them? Not all the time, right? I had to learn. It's a skill. And I would say within that year, you've been following me and supporting me for years, Brooke. You saw I was, attracting things like brand partnerships with Mercedes-Benz and winning a $10,000 Visa grant and, speaking gigs that were 5 figures. Like, there was a lot of stuff coming my way when I started putting myself out there. And I think that the formula, whether you're pitching media or pitching opportunities, 50% of the time they should be incoming, and 50% of the time you should be outbound, like looking for those opportunities, right? But once you start intentionally pitching the media, if you're doing let's say when last year I think I did 6 interviews, 3 I pitched, 3 came in, right? Like, you really should think about it. It's a give and take, and you can't get there if you are not intentionally pitching and not intentionally putting yourself out there.
I think that's really important, because there's 2 things I wanted to pull out of what you just said. There was a lot there, and I love your epiphany. That'll be in the recap, by the way. But one of the things that I think is really valuable, one of them is you've really named what a KPI can look like, a key performance indicator, something, a measure of success. So for the people who are out there putting all these pitches out, some people putting out a lot of pitches because they don't have a coach and they're not structured well. And I know you've got great guides around that. But then there's the flip side of how many people are starting to come to you because they see you as a thought leader. And that's a great measure of success. But there's another piece that you touched on, and I think is really valuable. And you've talked about this again in answering this question around the impact piece. And there's, I think, a connection there as well. When we look at some of the work that women are doing is intentional. There is often a direct desire to create impact, and thinking about the cascade, not just of the work from a profitability perspective, but thinking about the work from this cascade of impact. Do you have any thoughts on that, or maybe the types of stories that you see or the types of women you work with?
I think that we forget as women entrepreneurs that we are, I don't know, innately thinking about impact first, right? And I think that when you think about impact first, you think about your why, you think about your big vision, you lean into that, that's actually what's going to make you more successful. The media is looking for those stories. That's exactly what it is. I talk with so many women and I look at them, I'm like, you literally have all the pieces there. It's just about pulling it together. And when I say all the pieces, they understand what their business does. They understand how to articulate what it is that they do. They are making an impact. They have a different perspective. And I will tell you, like, most of the people that I speak with have all of those things. It just might not be, they don't understand how to connect that to the media's news cycle. So I always say, it's literally like when you're connecting things to social media. You're going to be talking about certain things, certain times of the year. You're going to talk, let's just go through this really quickly. Goals, in January. You're going to be talking about self-care in February. You're going to be talking about International Women's Day in March. April, you're going to be talking about spring and reset. This is applicable to many different industries, right? From a home organizer to a business coach, literally. May, Maternal Mental Health Month. Maybe you're talking about end of school in June, the summer holidays, maybe pulling back a little bit. September is really about getting back into that cycle. October, getting colder, seasonal
Affective disorder.
Or yep, that's coming into play. Thanksgiving. November's kind of a little bit of a strange month, but it's leading up to the holidays, and then we have all the stuff happening around the holidays. There you go. There's your calendar. There's your calendar. It's literally what the cycle is. It's not going to change. What's going to change is your perspective. That's literally how you have to look at it. So our skill here, I work with another exceptional coach. Her name's Heather, and she actually, and I worked at that community station that I was telling you about back in 2005 together. And we never actually worked directly, which is funny. And we worked kind of in tandem, like in different parts of the country, in same newsrooms, like never directly. And here we are, which is awesome.
That's so fun.
But we are able to just really understand, because we've been telling thousands of stories over the years, what is going to be newsworthy. The odd time, when I say odd time, out of 100 stories that we pitch, I've maybe sent a personal text message to the media to do a soft pitch to see if it's interesting, maybe 6 or 7 times.
Okay.
We really have that strong sense of what's going to make it to air. Sometimes we're not sure. Sometimes the odd time we're not sure, and I do send a quick text message. But the whole purpose of what we do and how we do it is to not get in the way. We're not trying to be a gatekeeper, and we're not trying to block you from building your own relationships with the media. We really are changing the way the media game is played out. And not only from the perspective of how entrepreneurs land media, but from the perspective of someone like myself who does PR. Why would I want to leave a newsroom and be on all the time and then come into PR and be on this all the time, right? Like, that's not something that I need to do as a mom with 2 boys who have a lot of energy. So
I know we're almost at time, and I feel like one day you and I are going to have a completely different conversation around boundaries and time blocking and time management, because you've actually brought it up multiple times on this call today.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm known for it. I'm known for it. People know. Like, people, when they email me, they're like, call me, and then they leave their number. I'm like, I'm not calling you. Get myself into my calendar and book a time, right? Like, my people know my boundaries are pretty tight.
And I love it. I love it. So we're going to have that conversation another day. Are there any final words that you want to share with everyone today?
I just want everybody to remember that your story is important, whether you are able to connect the dots or not. You already are newsworthy, and it's really about the mindset that you have, the attitude, and the ambition.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And the audacity.
Audacity, for sure.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining Best for Women Live today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. We'll do this again soon.
I look forward to to it, my friend. All right. For everyone else, have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye bye.